Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here with you, at least virtually, in a seminar on discussions about revitalizing French industry. I've always admired the ability of the French to balance economic and social benefits, and the discussions you're about to undertake will be an important part of doing that for an entirely new world. I'm going to be presenting a set of slides this afternoon to illustrate my main points. They are all available to the organizers, so you don't need to write down anything in order to capture my main ideas. Today I will be talking about my thoughts on priorities for the renaissance of industry in France. In 1972, I was on the faculty at MIT in Boston. I led a scientific team that developed a computer simulation model to understand the long-term causes and consequences of physical growth on the planet. We couldn't predict the future, but we could show many different possibilities, and one of them was the so-called standard scenario, which showed how things would unfold without major changes in economic and political policies. And the result, as you can see, is that between 1972 and the end of the century, we expected on average there would be great success. Food would improve per person, industrial output per capita would go up on average, the population would rise, pollution would be not so great, but it would increase. And resources would come down, but not to such levels that they would begin to affect industry. Many independent analysts in Australia and other countries have shown since then that this scenario does seem to be a pretty good representation of current trends. Of course, we didn't in 1972 anticipate in 2020 that there would be a pandemic, but it was clear that by that time, industry and population would be far above sustainable levels. And when something is above sustainable levels, you know for sure that problems are going to come along to take it back down. So let me make a few main points about this scenario. That slide is not a prediction. It was, as I said, just one of 13 different possibilities, a so-called business as usual scenario. However, many independent researchers have subsequently concluded that that is, in fact, more or less the trajectory of the global system. That scenario, incidentally, is included in the French translation of the third edition of our book. We've gone back twice since our 1972 study to redo the analysis and update our conclusions. The third book is available in your language. Of course, we didn't predict the COVID-19 epidemic, but it was just one of three possibilities for reducing growth. The other two possibilities, besides disease, are famine and war. The global response to the pandemic must not be seen as simply an interruption in an ongoing trend, but it is really a fundamental turning point. The world in the future is going to look very, very different from what it looked in the 80s, 90s, and even the early decades of this century. Industry is going to face a continuing set of problems until the transition is complete. On the horizon are climate change, much more expensive energy, trade barriers with your major trading partners, cultural shifts, and the growth of toxic pollution, just a few. A dominant factor will be resources and energy, which are now much more expensive than they were when you built up your industry, and will become even more so in the future. As a result, although efficiency has been a priority for survival in the past, the priority now shifts over to resilience. The successful firms in the past were the ones who could increase their efficiency. The ones in the future will be the ones who can survive shocks. So let me provide you with a few definitions. Efficiency is simply the ratio of an important output to an important input. Typically, the output you can sell and the input you have to pay for. Examples would be, for example, the number of kilometers you can get from your car with a liter of gas, the amount of light you can get from a bulb per watt of electricity, the amount that you can sell for each hour of labor that you pay, the kilograms of food per liter of water, the units produced per hour of factory time. These are all common efficiency measures. I'm sure most of you have spent time trying to understand how to make those ratios bigger. Resilience is something entirely different. It is the ability to sustain output even when there is a fluctuation in the critical input. The tsunami in Japan gave us an interesting example of that. To increase efficiency, car companies had localized their production of crucial parts in just one factory. Great for cost, but when the earthquake and the tsunami and the radiation interrupted the production of that factory, suddenly every car company in the world could no longer produce the cars that they needed. That's the difference between efficiency and resilience. The unfortunate fact is that there's an inescapable trade-off. As you push efficiency to higher and higher levels, the resilience of the system declines, as I show here. Because of many decades of success, industry has made efficiency very high now. But the result is that resilience is very low. And your priority, an important priority for all of us, will be to understand how we can move into the future with a better balance. Efficiency relatively good, but with the ability to withstand shock. Now, I can speak in general about how you might achieve that in industry. You move from a few larger international facilities to many smaller ones which produce locally. You move from the sale of products over to the sale of the service from those products, as, for example, the carpet company in the United States, which has shifted from selling carpets over to renting them out, essentially selling their services. You move from products that are designed to be used until they become defective and are discarded and replaced over to products that can be repaired. You move from the goal of maximizing your profits over to the goal of maximizing welfare, not only for your clients, but also for the people you employ. You move from the goal of trying to reduce initial cost over to reducing life cycle costs, from minimizing the cost of labor over to minimizing the cost of all inputs over the life cycle. And that's going to mean moving from specific specialized assembly lines over to those which are much more flexible. You can do it, but of course there are obstacles. The biggest obstacle is not understanding what needs to be done. I think that's fairly clear. The problem is going to be deciding how to do it in a world where the competitive advantage goes to the person or the firm that can offer the lowest initial purchase price, because they're not paying for the external costs over time of their products. And you'll need to deal with the fact that the European Union has imposed requirements on the movement of goods across borders. It may be you will find it difficult to block goods which don't meet your resilience requirements. I know that this is a very difficult task, but French industry's been innovative in the past, and I'm sure you will find ways to deal with these problems. I wish you great success in your efforts.